Welcome to the Liz Wheeler Show. It is Wednesday, March 5th, or as it's popularly known today, the day after one of the most profound, powerful speeches an American president has ever given. Did you guys watch President Trump last night? Now, this speech was different than some of President Trump's speeches. It didn't have the highfalutin rhetoric, the narrative arcs that some of President Trump's speeches, the ones that or maybe written by Stephen Miller, have had in the past. President Trump's speech was the most powerful speech I have heard in a long time for one specific reason. We're going to talk about that today because it's very important to understand the strategy that went into the crafting of this speech because it reflects the strategy that Trump is using in his administration to get things done. We're also going to talk today about the surprising threat that has been aimed at Elon Musk's efforts to DOGE the administrative state and where that threat is coming from. It's not the House of Representatives. It's not the deep state. It is more specifically one individual, and that individual is a Republican who needs to be exposed. We are also going to talk about some headlines from around the country today, a Supreme Court ruling and updates on Ukraine. All of that and more today on the Liz Wheeler Show. All right, guys, before we get started talking about the way that President Trump crafted his speech to make it one of the most powerful speeches that I've heard him give in a long time, and not because it had this soaring rhetoric, but because he employed a tactic that absolutely destroyed his opposition, but did it in both a savage but gentlemanly manner. Before we do that, I want to talk to you about the playbook that is ivermectin. And when I say the playbook that is ivermectin, what I mean is during COVID, we understood, both because of studies and because of anecdotal evidence, that ivermectin was effective against the COVID-19 virus. I had family members that took ivermectin and it took the COVID virus away within 24 hours. It was remarkable. You guys probably had the same experience. And yet, we were told by public health officials, by politicians, by doctors, by pharmacists, by probably angry people on social media as well, that it's a horse drug, it's a cow drug, don't take it. The FDA said, do not take this drug, even though it's been widely used for a long time. And the reason that they told us not to use it is not because they thought it was ineffective or because they thought it was dangerous. They knew that it was neither of those two things. The reason they told us not to take it is because if they had admitted it was effective against COVID, they would never have gotten their emergency use authorization for their mRNA vaccine. So they lied to us, which is bad. They lied to us for profit, which is grotesque. They lied to us to profit at our expense, which is evil. And this playbook that they wrote, it wasn't just an isolated incident. The reason I'm calling it a playbook is because they are going to apply this to future outbreaks, to future viruses, to future situations in which they control our lives. And I refuse to put myself or my family in that situation anymore. That's why I am proud to partner with All Family Pharmacy. All Family Pharmacy offers over 200 medications and bundled emergency packages to make sure that you and your family are prepared for anything. Don't leave it in the hands of Fauci. Don't let Fauci control anything anymore. And now at the heart of All Family Pharmacy's effort is the Make America Healthy Again movement, which means it's a call to you to take control over your health, to prepare for the unexpected. And even if you aren't fully prepared, I'm probably in this boat sometimes. If you find yourself in a pinch, All Family Pharmacy has you covered with overnight delivery. So check them out, allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. Because you are part of this movement, use code Liz10 at checkout for an exclusive discount. That's allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz, code Liz10. All right, so let me give you my biggest takeaway from President Trump's speech last night. And I think it's not only important because so many people watched last night, it's a signal both to us and to President Trump's opposition in the Democrat Party and in the deep state of what is to come, which is very important for us to understand. So let's start with President Trump's demeanor. President Trump last night was calm, he was cool, and he was in command. And the reason that that's important to note, besides it just making it more pleasant to watch a speech where someone is calm, cool, and in command, is because President Trump is a very different person as an individual, not just as a president, a very different person than he was in 2016. He's a very different person as a result of being the target of an assassination attempt, not once in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th, but twice when a would-be assassin with shady ties to Ukraine attempted to take him out on his golf course after he had putted out the fifth hole. He's a very different person, and he believes what he said last night when he said that he was saved from death, especially in Butler, Pennsylvania, for a reason. God preserved his life in order to make America great. And you can tell that there's been this profound change in President Trump. He no longer cares about the silly Democrats that were planning to be, they were planning the heckler's veto. What's the heckler's veto? Think of a college campus. When any one of us conservative speakers goes to a college campus, we're giving a speech on, it doesn't even matter what topic, and leftists populate in the crowd and they start interrupting and yelling. We see this actually in Senate confirmation hearings now too, where they try to drown out the speaker. The heckler's veto is the weakest form of censorship in our country. It's what happens when the other side is so desperate. It's actually what I would call verbal terrorism. And I say that because the political science definition of terrorism is an act of violence carried out against a civilian population because the terrorist has a political or religious agenda that they otherwise can't bring attention to. So they commit this act of violence in order to bring attention to their political agenda. That's, in a sense, what the heckler's veto is, but with whining and words and screeches and disruption. Whatever political agenda the heckler has, they cannot make an argument to the people, the voters, in this case in Congress, their constituents, because people don't want to hear it. They don't agree with that political agenda. And so they resort to disruption. They resort to trying to drown out the president. And that's what we saw at the very beginning of the speech. We saw Democratic Congressman Al Green, who's got to be like 170 years old now, shaking his cane angrily at the president. This is the best the Democrats could do to try to distract you from what the president was saying. And we have that as a video. And I think let's roll that tape so we can visualize what the Democrats are doing right now.
Mr. Green, take your seat.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Take your seat, sir. Take your seat. Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the sergeant at arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
There's another angle of this video that shows J.D. Vance behind President Trump. Maybe we'll get to it still in this video, but there's another angle of this video that shows J.D. Vance giving like the 3 strikes and you're out.
Members are directed to
out.
uphold and maintain the quorum.
When I saw this, I was like,
House.
this man is the vice president of the United
continue.
States.
Thank you.
And yet he's really just a Midwestern boy that's like, get him out of here. Get him out of here, bouncer. You gotta love that. Normalcy being brought back to the White House. But here's the point of this. Not only are the Democrats so desperate that they have, one of their most ridiculous members shake a cane. Who thought that would be a good, what PR comms people thought that would be good optics for the Democrats? Let me shake my cane at you, President Trump. Yeah, you've really proved your point there. Not only is this desperation, because their actual strategy is to disrupt to the point that you can't hear what the president has to say. They are so insecure about their counter arguments and about their own positions that they think that their best strategy is simply to stop you from hearing what President Trump is doing, because they know once you do hear what President Trump is doing, it doesn't matter if you love Trump or if you are ambivalent about Trump or even if you disliked Trump in the past. Most people, and this is according to a CBS poll, 75% of people had a positive reaction to Trump's speech last night, which means that 3 out of 4 people in our country watching last night appreciate what the president is doing and support the actions that he has taken in the first 6 weeks in office. That is a stunning majority of people. I mean, the word mandate is thrown about a lot during these first weeks of the Trump administration. A 75% approval rating on a speech like this is a mandate the likes of which we have never seen in the United States of America, ever in the history of our country. And yet, going back to President Trump's demeanor, not only are the Democrats desperate, President Trump is a different person. He's calm, he's cool, and he's in command. And the way that is applied to these haters is very different than the first time around. When President Trump was in office as the 45th president, he still thought that he could seek or achieve the validation of some of the people that hated him. He thought that he could prove them wrong. He thought he could convince them, and he allowed himself to be rattled by them sometimes. He allowed himself to be triggered by them sometimes. No more. No more. President Trump, they're like mosquitoes biting around his ankles. You can tell, it doesn't raise his adrenaline an iota. None of it. He has complete emotional control. And I know that some people will say, well, what about when he called Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas? That was entirely calculated, because Pocahontas is not just an ad hominem attack against Elizabeth Warren, although it is, of course, hilarious and one of my favorite insults that President Trump has come up with. But one of the reasons it's the most brilliant insult that he's ever come up with is because in that one word, he highlights to you that Elizabeth Warren is not just terrible and she doesn't just abuse her power. She does those two things based on a lie. She got into her position of power by lying to you, by pretending she's something that she's not, by pretending to be a victim when she's not, by pretending she's Native American because she thinks she has high cheekbones, and publishing a recipe in a cookbook called Pow Wow Chow, and she's a liar. And in one word, Pocahontas, President Trump reminds you that her political opinions are tainted by her egregious lies, that she should be kicked out of office, to use J.D. Vance's hand motion here, kicked out of office for these types of lies. President Trump is a very different person than he was, and he's carrying out his vocation, which he has rightly identified as God saving him from that assassin bullet to make America great again. But now, of course, we get to the strategic brilliance of this speech. And this is the moment that President Trump signaled to us what his strategy is. And this is the moment that President Trump captured the 75% approval rating that he had. That moment, of course, is when President Trump pointed to the Democrats. They were on his right, in the rotunda last night, or in the Capitol last night. And he said to them, no matter what I do, even if I cured cancer or achieved world peace, you still would not clap. You still would not applaud. You still would not stand up. Let's roll this video.
And once again, I look at the Democrats in front of me and I realize there is absolutely nothing I can say to make them happy, or to make them stand or smile or applaud. Nothing I can do. I could find a cure to the most devastating disease, a disease that would wipe out entire nations, or announce the answers to the greatest economy in history, or the stoppage of crime to the lowest levels ever recorded. And these people sitting right here will not clap, will not stand, and certainly will not cheer for these astronomical achievements. They won't do it, no matter what. Five times I've been up here. It's very sad, and it just shouldn't be this way.
Now, the brilliance of this is that President Trump, I know Jake Tapper said that he was oppositional, or he was defiant, or some word that is clearly Jake Tapper's emotional reaction to us calling him out for publishing a book claiming that the Democrats claiming to uncover the cover-up of Democrats hiding Joe Biden's mental decline, when Jake Tapper was a part of that cover-up. And Jake Tapper is known for his emotional outbursts, especially he's known for sending people private messages on X if they criticize him because he can't emotionally handle it. And that's exactly what we saw when Jake Tapper, when he said Trump was so oppositional, he was so defiant. No, he wasn't. He was perfectly in control, and he said he did something. And this is the thing that kept catching me all night. He let the Democrats speak for themselves. He actually didn't use all the words that accurately describe the Democrats. He didn't call them communists. He didn't call them Marxists. He didn't call them anti-American. He didn't say that they were trying to destroy the fabric of our nation. He didn't call them anti-Christian. He didn't call them hateful of Catholics. He didn't mention that they branded parents as domestic terrorists when parents didn't want critical race theory and transgender ideology indoctrinated into their children in public schools. He didn't do any of that. He didn't call them liars. He didn't call them stupid. He didn't do any of that. All he did was bring your attention to the Democrats' behavior. He, in a sense, gave the Democrats the floor. He said, here's the mic. I want to highlight your behavior. You have an agenda. You want to showcase what you believe? Well, be my guest. And this was one of the most brilliant setups for a speech that I've seen in a long time, because what ended up happening is every time the Democrats fulfilled President Trump's observation, and they did repeatedly throughout the night, every time they did, our attention was brought back to the fact that these are bad people. But President Trump didn't have to say it. He just brought our attention to what was already happening. So the list of things that the Democrats refused to applaud for last night, that's what sticks in our minds. after the speech last night. That's what sticks in the minds of the American people. Again, whether you like Trump, whether you dislike Trump, whether you're highly engaged in politics, whether you are just peeking in during bigger events on the periphery of politics, you notice that Democrats refused to stand and clap for a 12-year-old boy who's been battling brain cancer, who President Trump, whose lifelong dream was to be a police officer, who President Trump had the Secret Service agent give an honorary badge to last night. It was one of the most touching moments. And Tim, do we have this clip of this young boy, DJ, the young boy with brain cancer?
And tonight, DJ, we're going to do you the biggest honor of them all. I am asking our new Secret Service Director, Sean Curran, to officially make you an agent of the United States Secret Service.
If that doesn't touch your heart, then you have no heart. Oh, look at that hug. If that doesn't touch your soul, then may I suggest you've sold your soul. And again, that's exactly what the Democrats proved, because they could not bring themselves to stand up and applaud for DJ. This should be an apolitical moment. This young boy battling brain cancer, President Trump highlighted him and extended him dignity and respect. And then, yes, said he shouldn't have this brain cancer. It's a result of chemical exposure. And we're going to clean up our country so that children do not have cancer based on chemical exposure. And the Democrats couldn't bring themselves to applaud or stand up for that. And then, of course, on MSNBC afterward, Nicole Wallace said, I mean, I can't even believe she hasn't been fired for this, or that she hasn't been forced to apologize this. She suggested that this young boy, as a result of being given a badge by the Secret Service, might kill himself. Listen to this woman.
But I think this was a lesson in finding one thing that you let yourself feel. And I let myself feel joy about DJ. And I hope he's alive for another, 95 years, right? And I hope he lives and the life he wants to live. He wants to be a cop. He knows what he wants to do. And maybe when you have childhood cancer, that crystallizes for you. And I hope he has a long life as a law enforcement officer. But I hope he never has to defend the United States Capitol against Donald Trump's supporters. And if he does, I hope he isn't one of the 6 who loses his life to suicide. And I hope he isn't one who has to testify against the people who carried out acts of seditious conspiracy and then live to see Donald Trump pardon those people.
What are you saying? Is your heart so embittered? Have you sold the entirety of your soul to the point where you look at a young child suffering from brain cancer, and because he accepted an honor bestowed on him, a ceremonial honor given by President Trump to be part of the Secret Service, you say, well, I hope you don't kill yourself. This is what I said last night. The Democrats refused to stand for Laken Riley, the college student from Georgia who was out for a run. She was a nursing student out for a run when she was accosted by an illegal alien, a criminal illegal alien, whom the Biden administration refused to deport. She fought back for 15 minutes after he assaulted her before her Apple Watch said that her heart stopped beating. She fought back against her murderer for 15 minutes. And when Donald Trump honored her, her mother was there and her sister was there. The Democrats couldn't bring themselves to stand up and honor her. And Jocelyn Nungary, a 12-year-old girl from Texas who was accosted by an illegal alien and was 3 illegal aliens, and brutally murdered under a bridge. The Democrats refused to applaud for her, to stand up for her, and to recognize her. When the man who was killed at President Trump's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th, the firefighter, Corey Comparatore, when his family was honored by President Trump, the Democrats refused to clap and cheer. When President Trump announced that the terrorist, the radical Islamist terrorist who was responsible for killing 13 American military service members in Afghanistan during Biden's botched withdrawal, the Democrats couldn't bring themselves to stand up and cheer. They didn't cheer for protecting girls and girls' sports from men who identify as girls. They didn't cheer for a police officer's widow. This is not just politics. What we are facing in our country right now is a battle of good versus evil. And that was evident last night. And President Trump highlighted it. President Trump brought your attention to it so effectively because he let the Democrats' behavior speak for itself. And the Democrats who showed up in pink, they said they wanted to wear pink to highlight their fight for women's rights. Well, these same Democrats wearing pink for women's rights all voted no on a bill that would ban biological boys from playing in girls' sports. And by the way, one of those people wearing pink in the Democrat caucus last night was a man who grew his hair out and wears women's clothing and lipstick and pretends that he's a girl. This is the Democrat Party. And by the way, the Democrats did clap for one thing, though, which I do think we should also highlight. They clapped for war in Ukraine. Take a look at this.
With no end in sight, the United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense. With no security, with no anything. Do you want to keep it going for another 5 years? Yeah, you would say Pocahontas says yes. $2,000 people are being killed every single week. More than that.
Again, one of President Trump's here's what I want to know, and you can drop your comment in the live chat. We were having this debate last night as we were watching this live. Did President Trump's speechwriters put that into his speech? Did President Trump put that into his speech ahead of time, or was that an off-the-cuff ad lib? Because Elizabeth Warren, who was on her phone during the speech, when Trump says, "Do you want the war in Ukraine to go for another 5 years?" she loudly responded in the audience, "Yes." And so President Trump highlighted her. And again, this goes back to my point at the beginning. He didn't just call her Pocahontas because she was a heckler. He called her Pocahontas because he's bringing attention to her behavior. She wants the war in Ukraine to continue. She wants your money to continue to be sent to Zelensky. And meanwhile, she is in her position of power because she lied. She is absolutely corrupt. But one of President Trump's greatest skills is using humor to highlight reality. And he did this too. Not just humor like ha-ha funny, but humor in the sense of highlighting the absurd, the almost unbelievable absurdity. And the example here, of course, is the Social Security corruption that Elon Musk has untangled thanks to DOGE. And President Trump, we actually read this list, the same list, you'll remember this, from I think it was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. We read this list on the show. The Department of Government Efficiency had released a list of some of the most egregious corruption that they had identified at USAID. These tens of millions and billions of dollars of grants going to ridiculous things all around the world. We read that on this show. You guys thought it was funny. I thought it was funny because it is funny, except for the fact that it's real. President Trump read that exact same list last night during his speech.
$40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. Nobody knows what that is. $8 million to promote LGBTQI+ in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody has ever heard of. $60 million for indigenous peoples and Afro-Colombian empowerment in Central America. $60 million.
And of course, again, you think this is an ad lib? You think this was a pre-planned line? My money is on ad lib. You can tell when Trump ad libs. His tone of voice changes a little bit. It's also just funny that he ad libs in moments like these because I don't think presidents often ad lib in big speeches unless you are President Trump. But he's reading the ages of the people who are supposedly getting Social Security. It's obviously the examples of fraud. And he turns to HHS Secretary RFK Jr. and he goes, well, a 345-year-old, I guess our country's Doing okay, doing better health-wise than we thought, huh, Bobby? Take a look at this. Funniest line of the night.
Over 130,000 people, according to the Social Security databases, are age over 160 years old. We have a healthier country than I thought, Bobby.
Yes, if that's true, we certainly have a healthier country than we all thought. Okay. So one of the most profound moments, this is probably my favorite moment, and I will differentiate my favorite moment from the moment that showed us what his strategy was for the speech and why it was so effective. The strategic moment was him at the very beginning, before the Democrats actually refused to clap or applaud, him telling us, we'll keep an eye on them and watch what they refuse to clap and applaud about. But then the most significant time that the Democrats refused to clap and applaud was when President Trump was speaking about gender ideology. And he said, my message to American children, or any child really, is that you are perfect the way that God made you. Listen to these words from President Trump.
And now I want Congress to pass a bill permanently banning and criminalizing sex changes on children and forever ending the lie that any child is trapped in the wrong body. This is a big lie. And our message to every child in America is that you are perfect exactly the way God made you.
You are perfect exactly the way God made you. Every child in America needs to hear that message. This is such a profoundly pro-life message from President Trump. I can't remember, I don't think we've ever had a politician, let alone a president of the United States, who has made that statement so boldly and so sincerely. Certainly, none that I can remember. You can tell me if there's one that somebody that I'm forgetting. And the Democrats refuse to stand for that because they don't believe that. They don't believe that your child is made in God's image. They don't believe that your child is made perfectly by God. They don't believe that your child was made because God looked at the universe and couldn't imagine the universe without your child just the way that God made him or her. I was so touched by that message and so appalled that the Democrats refused to stand. But it reminded me, too, that 80% of the American people are against gender ideology. 80% of the American people don't want boys and girls sports. 80% of the American people, and the number's growing by the day as the reality of transgenderism is exposed, the vast, vast, vast majority of people reject this evil ideology for the evil ideology that it is. And President Trump spoke to the majority of Americans, the fringe 20%, the insane people, the evil people. They were sitting right there in Congress. Those are the fringe people that want to trans your kids. But President Trump looks at your child and says, your child is made perfectly in God's image. What a profound statement. Now, there was one person in that room last night who is a fraud. There's one person in that room who was clapping a lot for things he doesn't believe in. There was one person who is masquerading as a Republican who laughed at the list of abuses that President Trump introduced, these different ridiculous things that DOGE has identified, who has voted in favor of those very abuses. We're going to talk about him in just a second. But first, I want to talk to you about Crowd Health. I've told you that my husband and I ditched our health insurance, right? This was late last year. We simply called and we said, you know what? No more. We are not going to be part of the system. You are charging us an arm and a leg every month for health insurance premiums. The way that we take care of our health, nothing that we do for our health was ever covered by insurance. It was always an absolute nightmare, super frustrating. And of course, this is not just us. Claim denials in general in our country are becoming more and more common. Almost every one of you, I'm sure, if we spoke about this, would give me a story probably from the last 2 years where, yep, I had something happen. I thought it was going to be covered. And then I got this humongous bill and the claim was denied. Well, statistically, 1 in 5 Obamacare claims are denied. this has just happened in the last year. It's unacceptable. This is why my family and I switched to Crowd Health. I called the CEO. I chatted with him. I wanted to make sure that I had the mental assurance that if my family has a health event, we have a group of people around us who are willing to help us pay for that. That's what Crowd Health is. It's not health insurance. I call it assurance. And it uses crowdfunding to help pay for health events. It's a remarkable, innovative concept. And compare the cost for a second. At Crowd Health, you pay $175 a month if you're an individual, $575 a month if you're a family of four or more. Compare that to your health insurance premiums. And for that price, you get access to a community of people who want to help you in the event of an emergency. We're talking telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, so much more without doctors' networks getting in the way. And of course, you join the crowd, a group of people like you and like me who want to help pay for each other's unexpected medical events. Let Crowd Health help with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months. Go to joincrowdhealth.com. You can use my promo code Liz. Crowd Health is not insurance. You can learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, promo code Liz. I'm going to talk to you about American Hartford Gold. In all the time that we have been alive, the US dollar has always been the primary currency. But that may not be the case any longer. The US dollar, thanks to Biden, is facing unprecedented inflation. Our politics is getting increasingly unstable, thanks to people like Norm Eisen. And as if that wasn't scary enough, the government and the globalists, not just our own government, is looking to take control over you by taking control over your money through a digital dollar. That is why it has never been more important than for you to take control over your wealth. Don't let your life savings become a casualty of failing banks or currency wars. Now is the time to call the only precious metal dealer that I trust, American Hartford Gold. They'll show you how to protect your savings, your retirement accounts by diversifying your wealth portfolio with physical gold and silver. My husband and I just did this. Now part of our wealth portfolio is in precious metals. American Hartford Gold's a great company. They stand with us on the Liz Wheeler Show. They are committed to us because we are committed to the truth. Tell them I sent you. They will give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first order. Call them now. Click the link in the description of this episode or call 866-996-5172. That's 866-996-5172 or text my name, Liz, to 998899. Again, the phone number is 866-996-5172 or text Liz to 998899. So there was one man in the room last night during President Trump's speech who was clapping for what President Trump was saying, was laughing at President Trump's joke, was disgusted, displaying visible disgust at the corruption President Trump was highlighting. And yet this man doesn't want it to stop. He doesn't want the corruption to stop. He doesn't want the wasteful spending to stop. He doesn't want the abuse of your taxpayer money to stop. And he said so. He not only voted in lockstep with Republican establishment that helped create this uniparty in Washington, D.C., he doesn't want it to stop. And that man is Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. This is according to the Washington Times. Let me give some context first before I quote from this. We are nearing another government shutdown. If there is not a continuing resolution or, God forbid, a budget passed by the House of Representatives by the end of next week, then the government will shut down. Now, you know me. I'm fine with that. Totally fine with the government shutting down. I think it would actually be a good lesson for all of us if we had a government shutdown for a month or two, just to see that nothing that we actually need stops when the government is shut down. It should be our call to cut the most of government, because most of it's not needed. Most of it's waste, if not abuse. Waste, if not abuse. But we're nearing this deadline, right? March 17th is when this government shutdown is going to happen if a continuing resolution is not passed. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, is supposed to be leading this charge on behalf of Republicans in securing a deal, creating some kind of continuing resolution, because that's what Republicans do instead of passing budgets. And yet, he's doing this in a way that's rejecting the very core of the Trump agenda, the very core of the mandate that we gave to Donald Trump when we voted for him in office. So now I'm going to read to you from the Washington Times. This is what they write. House Republicans coming stopgap spending bill extending last year's government funding levels through the end of September of this year will not include any savings the new Department of Government Efficiency says it has found in the first 2 months of the Trump administration. What? Why? Well, According to the Washington Times, House Speaker Mike Johnson, Louisiana Republican, said lawmakers, quote, don't have time to calculate all the DOGE savings across a wide array of government agencies ahead of the March 14th, though it's 14th, not 17th, deadline to pass a funding bill for the remainder of fiscal year 2025 to avoid a government shutdown. What are you talking about, Speaker Johnson, with all due respect? You don't have time? All of your time should be focused on that. That is the only purpose you serve in Congress. I never liked the fact that Speaker Johnson was Speaker of the House. He was a squishy Republican, very obviously so from the very beginning. I did like that Matt Gaetz unseated Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy. You're not going to convince me that that was a mistake, because it is a signal to what should happen to Speakers of the House when they are bought off, when they violate the will of the people whom they are supposed to be there serving. That's fine. That is not my criticism of Mike Johnson. My criticism is really an observation of Mike Johnson. He's a squishy Republican. He's really a weak man. And I didn't like that the Trump administration brought him into their cool kids club by, bringing him to the UFC fight, trying to rehab his reputation. But I'll tell you the reason why they did that. The reason why they did that is because, by and large, the Republican caucus in the House is very squishy. There's about 30 members of the House Freedom Caucus, and the rest of the Republicans in Congress are just establishment. They're just RINOs. They're there with an R by their name because that's the party they happen to choose, but they're not actually based. They're not conservative like you are. And so the Trump, at the time, campaign knew that if they were to hold a Speaker of the House election, they wouldn't get the Speaker of the House that they actually wanted. They wouldn't get a member of the House Freedom Caucus that could actually secure all of the votes needed to win a speakership race. And so what they did is they chose option number 2. Option number 2 is if you can't get the person that you actually want, if you can't get a based member of the Freedom Caucus to be Speaker of the House, then what you do is you pick a weak person. And you pick a weak person because a weak person is someone you can control. And that's what the Trump administration did. That's why they picked Mike Johnson. It's not because they wanted to side with him. It's not because he's someone that Trump would ever at any point of his life otherwise embrace. I would think Mike Johnson would be exactly the type of squishy, spineless person that Trump would not like. But the reason they picked him is because they thought they could control him. And if that worked, then we could give it okay, fine. Whatever, until we can figure out how to get more base Republicans in the House. But it's not working, because someone who is actively rejecting the president's mandate to DOGE the federal government when it comes to spending, who brands himself, didn't he get up on the CPAC stage, Mike Johnson, 2 weeks ago and say, no, we're not going to give the DOGE cuts back to the American people because, I'm a fiscal conservative, he said really condescendingly. That's Republicans' brand. That's who we are, even though they have been completely ineffective at enacting any kind of fiscal conservative in my entire lifetime. They are not fiscal conservatives. They're barely even better than Democrats. And then because their strategy of being fiscal conservatives, what is it? Paul Ryan going on cable news and Speaker Johnson, condescendingly tilting his head at CPAC and telling you that that's his brand. That's their strategy. That's why they think they can lay claim to that term. So President Trump comes in with Elon Musk and with DOGE, a new strategy, an unprecedented way of saving taxpayer money from waste and abuse. And it's working. It's effective. Oh, it's so effective. And Speaker Johnson doesn't like that. He doesn't like that it's effective. He's rejecting actual fiscal conservatism because it's coming from DOGE, because it's not the way that he thought it should come. But the way that he thought fiscal conservatism should work has failed and failed and failed and failed. And so now Speaker Johnson is rejecting actual fiscal conservatism in a continuing resolution from the House Republicans. And I'm just done with him. I am done with him. I understand why the Trump team brought him in, because they thought, okay, at least if we can't get the based House Freedom Caucus person we want as speaker, at least let's get a weak person that we can control. But if Mike Johnson is going to defy Trump, then Mike Johnson should not be the Speaker of the House. It is as simple as that. As simple as that. And I think, by the way, that we should let Speaker Mike Johnson know that that is the way that we feel. And we should let our members of Congress know that that is the way that we feel. All right, speaking of DOGE, this is one of the best stories that I've seen all day. This is hot. This is from Off the Press. The Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, announced on Tuesday that the Inter-American Foundation, that's one of the agencies or sub-agencies of the federal government I'd never heard of it till this article. Maybe you've heard of it. Maybe you haven't heard of it. DOGE has removed from this agency all but one employee from its payroll. It DOGE the agency down to one person, one dude, in order to comply with President Trump's executive order on reducing federal bureaucracy. The headcount at the independent federal agency prior to downsizing was 48. The average employee salary was $131,000 per year. This is according to DOGE. And then DOGE tweeted about it. They said the Inter-American Foundation, an agency whose primary action was to issue foreign grants with a budget of $60 million, has been reduced to its statutory minimum, meaning Congress mandates that there be at least one active employee. This Inter-American Foundation was created by Congress in 1969. It issues grants to countries in Latin America and the Caribbean for, quote, localized community-led development, according to the agency's website. So, of course, you know exactly what this is. USAID is the CIA front that uses taxpayer money in the form of they call it grants. They pretend that it's under the guise of helping democracy development around the globe. Many of these agencies have the same sort of operational playbook where they pretend that community-led development will get a grant to help these Latin American countries. No. This is just political warfare being funded by the American people, which is bad enough because we have not consented to our tax dollars being used for political warfare in this way. But it's also unacceptable because these agencies then turn their political warfare on the American people. And by the way, this Inter-American Foundation, if it really were effective, these grants were effective at fostering community-led development, then why are all the illegal aliens from Latin America still trying to cross our border? Because we were told reliably by the Joe Biden administration, by Kamala Harris, if we just spend more money in Latin America, then these illegal aliens wouldn't want to come to the United States in the first place. Well, I guess that $60 million a year budget is just not sufficient. It's just not enough of your money being sent to this government agency, these bureaucrats distributing it to other people, taking it from you and giving it to other people. But Elon Musk has doged it down to one little person. Gotta love that. All right, from CBS, the United States has halted sharing intelligence with Ukraine. This, of course, comes on the heels of President Trump stopping all military aid to Ukraine. This is what CBS reports. President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance have stopped intelligence sharing. The U.S. has paused intelligence sharing with its war-torn ally, according to CIA Director John Ratcliffe. Ratcliffe acknowledged the halt in intelligence sharing Wednesday morning during an interview on Fox. Ratcliffe said the pause is, quote, on the military front and the intelligence front, but did not elaborate further on the scope of the pause. I don't think the enormity of this can be overstated. To not only stop military aid, but to stop intelligence sharing. Oh, is Zelensky getting it? Getting what he finally has coming. Finally, President Trump is back in the White House. Remember this time last year we were sitting here and we said, I cannot believe that Joe Biden is sending more of our money to Ukraine. I cannot believe we are facing inflation because Joe Biden is spending all of our money. He's going to unseat the United States as a world superpower because our currency is going to be so devalued. They're going to take the US dollar away. It's not going to be the world reserve currency anymore. And we're going to have no negotiating power or leverage on the world stage because Joe Biden and the people who control him are sending all of our money to that freak Zelensky. And we were like, if only Trump was in office, this would never have happened. And now it's like we wake up a year later and the reality that Trump is in office is still trying to permeate my head every single day. It hasn't fully permeated my head. Stopping aid to Ukraine, cutting off intelligence sharing. It's the beginning of the end. There's no way that we go back to giving more money to Ukraine. There's no way we go back to any kind of significant real intelligence sharing with Zelensky. It's over. The beginning of the end has started. And what's happening now is not a question of whether the war in Ukraine is going to end. It's a question of just how good the U.S.'s deal is going to be once that war concludes, meaning just how good of a deal Donald Trump is going to secure for those rare earth minerals in Ukraine. I am so here for this. So here for this. All right, from ABC News, a breaking Supreme Court ruling. A sharply divided Supreme Court on Wednesday ruled that the Trump administration must comply with a district court order and pay out nearly $2 billion in foreign assistance funds to nonprofit aid groups for work already completed on the government's behalf. The court ruled 5-4, with Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett siding with the liberal judges. Oh, surprise, surprise, Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett. Has there ever been a bigger disappointment than Amy Coney Barrett? We were told she's going to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's based. She's a trad calf. No, she's a squish. She might as well be a leftist. She's at best a social justice Catholic, which doesn't count. ABC News says the court did not elaborate on the decision, but said the district court judge should, quote, clarify what obligations the government must fulfill to ensure compliance with the temporary restraining order with due regard for the feasibility of any compliance timelines. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that President Trump as chief executive doesn't have the power of the chief executive because Amy Coney Barrett and Justice Roberts don't think that he should? This just broke before we recorded, just broke. So I did not have time to read through, or before we're filming the show, I did not have time to read through and parse line by line, but I do want to read to you what Julie Kelly has to say about this. She said, Chief Justice Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett side with three libs on court in allowing a rogue Biden-appointed judge to impose a temporary restraining order against the Trump administration and force taxpayers to pay $2 billion in U.S. aid disbursements in contradiction to the president's order. Alito's dissent is, I do want to read a little piece of this. Alito's dissent is scathing. He says, as a result, the government must apparently pay the $2 billion post-haste, not because the law requires it, but simply because a district judge so ordered. As the nation's highest court, Alito writes, we have a duty to ensure that the power entrusted to federal judges by the Constitution is not abused. Today, the court fails to carry out that responsibility. Julie Kelly added, disgraceful. It is disgraceful. This is what Sean Davis of The Federalist said. He said, if the Supreme Court is going to ascribe to unelected inferior judges the full powers of the presidency, then it's probably time for the president to ignore the Supreme Court. It's an absurd judicial power grab, and the Constitution itself all but requires the president to defend and uphold the Constitution by rejecting lawless power grabs. That is quite a statement. And on that note, and we will, by the way, be diving into this more deeply, just like we did when these inferior court judges, this was 2 weeks ago, the inferior court judges issued nationwide injunctions against President Trump's executive orders when they have no authority to do so. They don't have the right. They don't have the authority to do that. And yet they did it to defy President Trump. They did it because they're judicial activists. And we dug into this. Does President Trump and the Trump administration, do they have any obligation to adhere to judges' rulings when judges are making rulings that are outside of their scope of authority? And the answer to that, as I shared with you, the answer to that in my analysis of the situation is no. No, they don't. And the question, of course, is today, does that apply to the Supreme Court as well? Josh Hammer and John Eastman said that Trump should ignore the inferior court judges. Josh Hammer said it a little more strongly than John Eastman did. John Eastman said, well, there is a method of recourse, but maybe we ought to reconsider that. Go back and watch those interviews. We'll post them in the description of this episode. And we will, of course, be diving more deeply into what happens when the Supreme Court subverts the president in a way that is unconstitutional. What is the president's obligation to the Supreme Court's ruling at that point? All right. Make sure you're subscribed at youtube.com/Liz Wheeler, at x.com/Liz_Wheeler, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. If you like to listen to the show on audio, which I know a lot of you guys do. Most of you guys like video. Some of you guys like audio. I appreciate you all being here today. We're going to have a good show tomorrow as well. So make sure you stick around. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.